Why run for re-election?
There are a lot of things that we have underway that I would like to see through. I think it's a very exciting time as well. We have some new major projects that are looming, and after many years of experience, I think it would be important to be a part of that right now.
What's your top priorities?
Some of them are a little bit boring. One of the first things I usually talk about is our infrastructure. When all of our kids are grown and move back to East Grand Rapids, I don't want them to ask us, why aren't the water pipes working? Why do we have to do all sorts of road building and infrastructure? I've worked very hard the last 8 years to get an entire accounting of what do we have underneath our streets? What do those water pipes look like? What do the sewer pipes look like? When I took office, there was no film of those. We didn't know what sort of shape they were in. So I made it a main goal to make sure that we understood it, and then to plan for the future. And Governor Snyder had recognized us as having the ability to do that, to be a benchmark for other cities. And so we know what's under there, and more importantly, we've planned for the future. We've planned out our budget so that as the years go on, we'll be able to address those. And so our kids won't have to worry about pipes breaking in large quantities or the roads not being in good shape. We've got that. So a little boring, but that's a major priority, is to stay on top of that, because it doesn't build itself and it's expensive. And if you take your eye off that ball, it can fall apart quickly. So we always have to make sure that's part of it. In addition, we have some big changes coming to Gaslight Village. Major property owner, really, we're fully built out city. And so there isn't very much empty space. But the one space everybody does know about is in Gaslight Village, there's unbuilt space where other buildings came down about 10 years ago. So the people that own that property have announced that they are going to be bringing in a $30 million project. Well, that's huge. That will change the face of East Grand Rapids for decades to come. And we only have one chance to get that right, because once it's built, it's going to be very difficult to change that. So that takes all the work of the city staff, of our planning commission, of our city commission, and I have experience as we went through that with the first phase. When you drive through Gaslight Village right now, you see the lovely village, you see the heated sidewalks, and that was all from the project that we did about 12 years ago. And so as we go into this next one, I want to make sure that we get this right, because if we don't, we're stuck with it. So I think asking the right questions, challenging the developers to make sure they're thinking about what's best for East Grand Rapids and the people of East Grand Rapids and Gaslight Village.
And that's my next question. What is important about this? What are the questions you feel you need to ask and the city needs to hold them accountable to?
And so we have not heard the project itself yet. They haven't brought it to the city. They've just announced to the Gaslight Village merchants that they're going to be bringing forward this project. But in the past, well, here's a great example. When we first started building the new phase of Gaslight Village back in 2008, something like that, 2007, we insisted that the developers first do the public portion, and that being where the stores are in the public plaza. And then after that, they did a lot of work on the projected condominiums. And then the bottom fell out of the market. And so they weren't able to build them. Well, if we had done the condominiums first and not the stores, that would have been very detrimental to East Grand Rapids. But we challenged them and said, this needs to get done first before we can do the rest of it. That's just one example, but you need to make sure that you're thinking about what's best for our city.
Well, this is what we call the open camera segment. Anything that I may not have asked you that you want the public to know about, you've got an open camera, an open mic, and tell us what you'd like to say.
Well, now there's a challenge to be succinct enough. It's an interesting year this year. We don't normally have this much interest, certainly not this many signs. And so I think that that's great, because I think that we're having a lot of really good dialogue. I've been surprised at some of the responses. I've been surprised at some people's, I guess I always just assume goodness of intentions, and that's what I want our city to continue to do. It is such a wonderful city. It's such a great place to live, and everybody is in this for our kids, for our neighbors, and I want to see that continue to go forward. Ultimately, when all is said and done with this election, I hope that we all still turn to each other and say, "You're my neighbor." That's how we've always done it in the past. East Grand Rapids will be fine, no matter which candidate wins, but I think it's really important, as I mentioned before, we don't want to make a lot of mistakes, particularly not right now, and I think that experience is very, very important. I've done this long enough. I know good questions asked, and I think the other thing that people forget is we're just not little sleepy East Grand Rapids anymore and dependent on just ourselves. It's really important to have that connection with the rest of the county and the rest of the area. What happens in East Grand Rapids is very dependent on what happens in Grand Rapids and what happens in Kentwood and what happens in Granville, and that we all do work together. And I have an excellent working relationship with the other mayors and other leaders in the city. And I think that that's important too. I believe that I will get this job, and more importantly, I will keep my eye on what's happening in the county that will benefit our community, but benefit for the county, the entire county.